GE. It is suitable for general family viewing.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's another Thursday, and as usual, we bring you Body Garage, the art of well-being, and I'm your host, Dr. Shepsi. Now, today we are going to talk about something that you cannot avoid to talk about, since these are things that happen to your life, at home, at work, every day. This is about the food that we consume, and in this episode, we are going to talk about the genetic modified organisms, in this case the genetic modified foods, and we are going to try and talk about some of the rumors or myths or the facts that you have been hearing about this section of foods. And we have on our show a food scientist, Martha. Karibu sana. It's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to
yes.
be
Karibu kwa show.
Asante sana.
Yes. It's not very common to hear that there is somebody who is a food scientist, who specializes in the science of food.
Yeah, maybe in Kenya, but the food scientists are all over. We are bringing changes in the world of food.
Right.
Yeah, so that is what pertains by a food scientist. Yeah.
Talk to us. What does food scientist entail? Like, what is your range of work?
As a food scientist, this is a very complex area because it deals from food production, food processing, food packaging, food consumption trends, the consumer acceptance, and also food innovation that is in the field of biotechnology. So this is a sector that is diverse, because you can have a food microbiologist, food chemist, food processors, food biotechnologist. Now the speciality now brings the experts in you.
So which part of that are you in?
For me, as Martha, I did a Bachelor of Science in Food Science and Technology, which covers the whole thing because it's the basis. And then later I did a Master's of Science in Food Science with specialty in food safety.
Yeah. Food safety.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay, we just got into the discussion right on. What's your full name and how can people find you?
My name is Martha Kuria. That is the name that I'm mostly known. In most cases, scientists are underground, but on LinkedIn you can find me as Martha Kuria. I talk a lot about foods. Yes.
On LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn.
All right.
Yeah.
Unapiga kelele huko?
Napiga kelele huko. I'm trying to tell people that we need to eat healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. So we are talking about the genetic modified food. I hope that's how you call it in your technical terms. But this is a conversation that has been happening in Kenya maybe more actively in the last a decade, the last 10 years. And back it was something that the government of Kenya refused to allow officially into the Kenyan market, right? But recently there have been kind of a soft spot to try and allow the genetic modified foods to come into Kenya. Last year, October 2022, President Ruto tried to now reintroduce that, of course in partnership with the major source of genetic modified foods, the United States of America. Before we go into those discussions, first of all, what is a genetic modified food? Ni nini?
Okay, this is a very complex topic because this is a topic that spurs emotions. Every time everyone wants to talk about genetically modified foods, people bring in emotions which are allowed because these are not something that happens in nature. And as humans, sometimes we are reluctant to embrace anything that is coming which is not naturally supposed to happen. So genetically modified foods, just as the name suggests, genetically modified, these are foods that are produced during the process of production there must be a genetic engineering part that has happened in these foods, specifically on the seeds. So, and when we talk about genetically, a gene is involved.
Genes, yeah.
Genes are involved. So any food to be termed as genetically modified food, it is a food that its genetic makeup, all the DNA, has been altered in a way to bring some certain desired traits. So a gene can either be sourced from a different organism or an organism that they are from the same strains or even from different strains. And that is now what brings the difference, because that doesn't happen in nature. Yeah, so the genetic makeup, that is the DNA, is altered, the gene, with the trait, because in a DNA, in the DNA makeup, we have different genes or bases that communicate different information. We have a gene that communicates colors, or the carotenoids. There is a gene that communicates resistance to diseases. So now the desired gene that is needed is the one that is altered. You can
Not
either
the
insert,
entire
not the entire
just a
food.
specific
There's
part.
a specific gene. The gene, you can either remove the gene if it is not desired in the plant, or it can be inserted from a different organism. And now that any food that you produced, by altering the genetic makeup, that is a genetic modified food. Yeah, but it is good to tell people to understand that this is for a specific trait. If, for example, I want to develop maize, because in Kenya, when you talk about genetic modified, they just look at maize. For Kenyans,
That's what I wanted actually to ask you next. Like,
Yeah.
what are the specific traits, as you call it, that we are looking to, that have already been worked on to be modified?
The technology is not, it is something that is done over time. For you to come up with a seed and say, now this one is a very safe genetically modified seed that you can cultivate in our lands, it has gone a series of assessments. So, like for example, in most traits that we are looking at, for now, with the changes in climate and the adverse weather conditions, you realize the productivity is going low, and then the extreme weather condition, maybe the heating, the extreme temperatures, they are resulting into the pests that attack our foods. They are mutating to resistant to the pesticides that we have, and now we find it is affecting our productivity. And whatever we want is food, and not just food, safe food. So if that maize, we have the gene that we can include, a gene that can resist these pests. The cob is just the same, and then we include a gene, it will not alter any nutritional composition or any functionality of this food at the end of the day. So if it is in maize cob, if maize plant, at the end of the day, we'll still eat ugali, which should taste the same, should cook the same. The processing should not be altered in any way. So that is why, like, the BT maize that has been allowed the other day, just last week, that now the court allowed, now scientists can roll out the varieties that we have, the genetically modified varieties. Now this is just resistant to drugs, to pests, I mean. It is just resistant to pests and diseases. So the maize cob will just grow, resist the cob, so it will not be affected. But when we are harvesting maize, which should not differ from the maize that we are planting now. Yeah.
They will not look different from
They
the
will
maize
not
that
look
we
different.
used to.
Phenotypically should be the same. Functionality and nutritionally should be the same. Yeah.
We're going to talk some of those things that you mentioned about later. So you said what the modifications of genes, one is the resistance to droughts, and then there's resistance to pests. Okay.
You can even modify to enhance nutritional profile.
Okay, but we are not yet doing that.
It is happening.
It is happening.
Elsewhere, yeah.
Not in Kenya.
Not in Kenya. Not even in Kenya. In Kenya, we have some. It is just because that they are not already allowed by the National Biosafety Authority to be rolled out. They have not been validated to be used. But research is happening. Kwa ground, a lot is happening. Yeah, in the lab and in the field.
Now, let's talk about what are some of the foods that are in Kenya. Okay, you can start with generally those ones that they have been approved, the foods that we know these are genetically modified. Which ones are they, and which ones are already in Kenya?
In Kenya, at the moment, we don't have any food. We should produce in Kenya. We don't have any food that is genetically modified that is in our market. Yes, not unless they are imported. You know, the National Biosafety Authority allows cultivation and the activities that is happening along the genetical modification activities. So it can be not unless they are imported. But in our farms, we are yet to produce any genetic modified.
None is already being grown in our farms?
None is already being grown in our farms, but we have trial fields that a lot is happening. We have potatoes by SIP, that is the center potato, is it called International Center of Potato Center? Yeah, they are already developing a potato variety that is resistant to potato blight disease, which is very rampant in our potato producing areas. Those ones, they are in testing fields. They are not yet rolled, not commercial. You know, because for you to come up with a seed, it is a seed. I said, first of all, these GM foods, they are different in different countries because every country has different problems. Our problem here might be drought. Other people's problem might be a certain pest. So when you are modifying them to suit your own, to find solution for your problems. Yeah, your local issues. So that is why you find in other countries they might be modifying them for other reasons, maybe to increase the starch content in this corn, especially in the US who are using it for cornstarch. But for us, bearing in mind that our country is 80% asphalt, so the most part of the country is dry area. Now, with the varieties we have, some of them, they don't grow in those areas, and we want to increase the productivity because everyone is talking about food safety, food security, and that is something that is happening because the population is growing. We have to cater for this population, and this population, when you talk about food security, it is when everyone can be able to access and afford food. For us to get to that level, we have to increase our productivity within our country, not by importing, within our country, by growing. And now, when we see if our land is not arable enough to grow these tropical foods, now we have to modify them to suit our problem now. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We are going to hold that thought right there. We are going to take a break, and when we are back, we'll pick the conversation right where we have left it. Welcome back. You are watching Body Garage, the Art of Wellbeing. I'm your host, Dr. Chepsi, and we are talking about the GM foods, the genetically modified foods. And right now, as we are back from the break, we are talking about the types of foods that are already in the market, maybe in Kenya already, that are known to have been modified genetically. Yes, Martha, you had mentioned about maize and potatoes. Are there other foods that we know are already being genetically modified?
Yeah, I can admit that a lot of research is going on genetic modification of foods. In Kenya currently, we have a variety of foods that are under trials. We have a variety of cassava that is resistant to pests and diseases. We also have a variety of biofortified sorghum that is also under trials. And basically in Kenya we are focusing, when I see a lot of research is focusing on staple foods, the foods that we are known to be consuming, because this is what people identify with when we talk about food security. There are families that they can't take anything else apart from ugali. And now to make this ugali sustainable, we have to increase the production. That is why a lot of research is happening around that area. Yeah.
And as you say, just to be clear, is that these foods are not yet released into the market, like for people to produce and to eat?
They haven't got approvals from the National Biosafety Authority, because this National Biosafety Authority doesn't work alone. It works with other agencies such as the Public Health, the KEBS, and then this one that is responsible for seed, the Carefree. All these agencies come together. So when we have a product or a variety that has been released, all of them, they have got into a consensus that clinical trials have been done, that this food is free from toxins, is free from anything that can cause any health effect, or it can harm the environment, or they can change the functionality of this product, or even the nutritional profile. Yeah.
So for the food, for the edible crops, none has already been released into the Kenyan market, but you mentioned something like cotton, which is already being used.
Yeah, in Kenya we're already growing BT cotton, which is genetically modified, which was released back in 2020. So it has been rolling up for the last 3 years. We are growing it, and now the BT cotton was developed to be resistant to pests and diseases, especially because this is a cash crop that is mostly grown for export. So we are already growing BT cotton in the country.
But for the edible stuff, not yet?
For the edible stuff, not yet.
All right. Because the reason we're asking that is because sometimes we go shopping, like in the supermarkets. We see these tomatoes that look huge and more colored. We see these maybe sukuma wiki, spinach, they have huge leaves, more colored, and we say these ones look like GMOs. Are they?
Yeah, those are just the misconception that is happening. Yeah, because every time you go to there are people even who can't buy a very nice potato because they have the perception that this is genetically modified. But there is a line between genetic modification and conventional breeding. So in most of our products that we have in the market, they have undergone breeding. Yeah, they have undergone breeding. That is improvements of the traits. You can have a very smooth potato, which mostly those people who are making fresh fries, they don't want potato with a lot of eyes. So there is a breed that has been developed which is very smooth for processability. When you put it in the machines, it is able to peel off. Well, those are breeded, they are not genetically modified.
Yeah. And breeding has the natural structures. Nobody has added anything or removed.
Breeding, you can have a trait from a different plant, but of the same species, not from different species. And the DNA is not altered in any way. Yeah.
All right. Now, let's talk about the meats, because this is where now things get hot. There are several things that we've had people talking about, including politicians. Major politicians have come out to say, let me quote, I will not say the name, but one of the major politicians recently mentioned that when you eat GMO foods, men will develop breasts and women will develop testicles. And, you know, of course, being people in leadership, people are going to believe them. And so our first myth we will talk about is, which you've addressed already partly, is that are all the foods we have in the supermarkets GMO?
Okay,
nowadays?
That one, without fear of contradiction, I can say in Kenya we haven't produced any GM edible food that is for consumption of humans and even in animal feeds. But sometimes the government allows importation of GM products for feeds, like the other day when we were importing duty-free maize, the yellow maize. Those were genetically modified but direct for animal production, for animal feeds, not for human consumption. At the moment, there's no product that is being developed for human consumption that is genetically modified. Though there is a lot of misconception going around, rumors, I think this is the place where we should now put facts and politics aside. because they are, some people say we'll grow horns, others say that very weird things will happen. But what I know is that maybe it is lack of awareness, what exactly is happening during the modification of this plant. And maybe I can give a summary of what happens during modification of crops, is that once a seed is developed genetically, not even developing a seed, it's just that a gene has been added to that seed. So it is not like it was developed from a cell. So once it is developed, a lot of assessment happens, and that is why we have the National Biosafety Authority, which now protects the safety of the consumers by making sure that safety assessments are done. And this safety assessment, they are done in a way that a comparative study, that we have the genetically modified crop and the one that is a conventional crop, and then they are compared. Is there any difference? They should not differ, not unless it is the nutritional profile that was altered.
Yes.
And that is the only nutritional parameter that should be found in the genetically modified crop. So the processability, the nutritional profile, even the physical appearance of the crop, the maize should just be like the maize that you have. But about the bigger leaves, it can happen if the gene that was introduced was in a way that, like, for example, if we want drought resistant, we know that the size and the structure of the leaf will differ, because if the gene was got from cactus, maybe for example, we expect some straight for that to hold the water. So that is why they are very specific for specific parameters.
So for now, we can confidently say that no food in Kenyan supermarkets and markets that you go to buy, no matter how colorful or how big the leaves look like, they are not GM foods yet.
They are not GM foods. And now this one also, we should look at what if it is the chemical that we are spraying. And then we are here blaming the genetic modification, and it is a lot of spraying. We have boosters, we have all sorts of sprays that are happening in the fields. Might be the one that are leading to this.
Let's leave that. We're going to talk about that a bit, the alternatives now. Our myth number 2 is that genetic modified foods are intrinsically harmful. They are dangerous to human health.
Yeah, that is a myth. The good thing you are talking about, let us go to the next
myth. Is it a myth
because
it
is a myth.
Yeah,
it is a myth because during safety assessment, we know that the DNA structure, they are made of proteins because they are amino acids. So the moment you introduce a different protein, the amino acid, the interaction may lead to expression of an unintended protein, because we know all those traits are protein based. So this intended, unintended, sometimes they can happen, and when they can happen, they are known, and correction measures are done. So maybe the aspect of their intrinsic harmful is because these proteins that have been expressed, some people might say that they are toxins. And during the assessment, there is a stage that, first of all, after you have known that the functionality is okay, the next stage is, can it cause toxicity or allergens? Because these are parameters or the attributes that are related to proteins. So by the time this product is released by the regulation, and you know, when they are carrying out those safety parameters, they are referring to the global regulations by WHO and FAO. So the toxicity aspect has to be done, and that is also why there are clinical trials. And then the allergies, the allergens, does that protein in one way or another cause allergens? And that is why even when you are looking for a trait to include to your new crop, the trait should not have allergens. Like, for example, as much as like soya can increase the protein content in maize or any other food, soya has allergens concerns. So not unless you are very sure that the gene that you are picking from soya does not lead to expression of these protein that is responsible for allergens, then it should not happen. Yeah, so they are not harmful. The trials have been done, and by the time they are rolled out, they have been proven that they are not toxic and they don't have allergens or any other carcinogens. Yeah.
All right. And if anything happens, then it will be something that will happen to even non-genetically modified foods, because there are foods that we still eat and they cause us problems, right?
True. Yeah, true. In fact, that is what the public need to know, that there's nothing that is changing this food. The way you are eating your ugali, it will still be the same ugali. If you had a problem with that starch, whether it is the conventional starch or the other one, you still have problems. Yes. Yeah.
All right, let's take a break, and so when we come back, we are going to look more into discussing more about more myths that you've heard about the GM foods. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We are talking about genetically modified foods, and we pick up on the discussion about the myths. So we've talked about two myths so far, about that all the foods we have in the supermarkets are GM foods, which we've agreed none exist so far in Kenyan market. The second one we talked about is genetically modified foods are intrinsically harmful, and the food scientist has told us that safety measures are observed at every stage, and you can rest assured they have not yet been proven to be that harmful. Now, our next myth that we need to talk about is that the GM foods do not contain nutrients. Is that true?
That is not true, because we have just said that it doesn't alter any nutritional profile of the food. Because there is one thing that some skeptical public health were feeling, that maybe by altering these genes, you might have the nutrients in, but will they be able to be processed, or even the digestibility and absorption in the system? And so far, nothing has been proven that the food that are developed genetically cannot be digested by the enzymes we have in our system or even absorbed in the body. So in fact, genetic modification is the one that is now enhancing the nutrient composition.
That's what I wanted to ask. Is there the ones that we have more than the usual nutrients?
Yes, but now that one, when it is specifically added, like we have an example of the golden rice. I don't know whether it is not common in Kenya, but there is a golden rice that was developed in some research institute in Philippines, an international research institute. The golden rice, which is being eaten by everyone in the Asian countries and even in the world. The golden rice, it was developed in a way that some people avoid rice because of the high content of carbohydrates, and now the changes in lifestyle, everyone is running away from carbs. But now there was a problem. This being a staple food in that nation, they realized that there is prevalence in vitamin A deficiency. So this golden rice, it is just rice with enhanced vitamin A content. Yeah, it was used now as a measure to curb the deficiency in vitamin A. Yeah, a lot is happening in the nutritional profile. They are being enhanced using genetic modification. Yeah.
And for that example you've used about the Philippines and the golden rice, so far, I don't know how many years it has been in use. So far, there hasn't been any issues that there is causing health problems.
No, so far, no problem. In fact, the positive side of it is that the prevalence of vitamin A deficiency is reducing. Yeah, so that is a positive side of it, that it is enhancing the nutritional profile.
Yes. I don't know if we'll be able to convince people in Kenya. We have our own traits that it takes time to build trust.
It is a very complex topic because Kenyans are very comfortable eating biofortified foods.
Biofortified.
Yes, these are like the orange-fleshed sweet potatoes. Everyone takes it. The very orange one. That is it was developed, though it was developed through breeding. Though some can be biofortified using the genetic technology, which a gene, like we can decide to have a high improved maize cob, and then we add some proteins from beans. So long as Kenyans don't hear that gene was developed from a microorganism, like in this case of BT maize, that is where they draw a line. But any other thing, we have a lot of campaigns everywhere with biofortification of foods, foods that are developed with enhanced nutritional composition. Some, even if they are developed using the conventional breeding, others are developed using the genetic modification. But it doesn't raise concern, as opposed to now when you talk at this one, the gene was got from a microorganism maybe. And this is something that people should understand, that when that gene is transferred, you're not eating microorganism. Don't feel like this gene will start expressing in my body and something will start happening.
Grow horns.
Grow horns, grow and all that.
Yeah.
No.
Which leads us to our next discussion, the myth that these genetically modified foods are going to cause, when we eat them, they're going to alter our bodies. And using the statements that some of the politicians made, like, you know, they will make men to grow breasts and women to grow testicles, and maybe others you will say it will cause infertility, or you will grow horns. So do these foods alter our bodies when we consume them?
Okay, before I answer that question, I can say that even the normal foods that we eat, they have their genetic makeup. Now, we have never seen somebody grow a flower. So even for these ones, they are just normal foods. And the genetic makeup of the food, just the food that we eat, some of them we consume their genetic, like the ones that we don't cook, like fruits, we consume the way they are. So we consume even the gene, and it is able to be metabolized in our body system and broken down. Not going to mutate and form any other thing in our bodies. And then in other foods that we cook, there are researchers that have shown that the genetic makeup of foods, plant-based foods, they are destroyed by processing.
When you cook
the DNA is not there anymore. So we don't eat the DNA. And in most cases, the gene is not even in the consumption part of the plant. Like, for instance, not unless it is for enhancement of nutrients. The ones that are working to resist drought and to resist pests, they're either on the cob, the leaves and all that, the one that we are not consuming. And they are playing their part in the resisting so that the crop can grow and produce. So they are not transferred into the edible part of the crop.
But if the edible part is the seeds, you're going to harvest the seed and plant it, it will still have the same trait.
If the intention or the target was the gene to go to the seed, and this mostly happens when we are enhancing nutrients. So the gene that we are taking is the gene that expressed this protein that has increased protein content, has increased zinc content, and all that. Yeah, which is not harmful to our body.
All right. Now, the next part is, do GMOs cause cancers? Because that's now the big part, cancer.
That is the biggest rumor.
Yeah. Do they?
That is the biggest rumor. And there is a time back, during when the government decided to lift the ban, the communication and everything was just surrounding the issue of development of tumors that lead to cancers. And they even said that is what made the 2012 ban to happen. Because by the time the ban was being initiated, it is because of a research that was done. And somebody said that the rats, the clinical trials, the rats in the lab, they develop tumors. And you know, in science, you don't just do a study and you publish and you conclude. There have to be a lot of studies that prove that whatever happened, just the way you are trying to cook, you cook your first food, it doesn't come out well. So you cook again until at the end of the day you'll know the problem is the flour. This flour can't cook something good. So genetically modified foods, they don't cause cancer because we know
it has been proven they don't cause cancer.
So far, we don't have any case that has proven that genetically modified organism can cause cancer.
Okay.
In fact, the research that is there, it is reduction of cancer.
By consuming these foods?
Okay, not by consuming this food, because as I keep saying that these foods, they are developed for specific attributes. For example, the other day in Europe, they developed a wheat variety. And we know everyone consumes baked products. And we know that the higher we consume baked products, the higher there is a chances that when you consume baked products with high level of acrylamide, acrylamide has a potency to cause cancer. It has been proven carcinogenic. And now, this one now they were developing because in other countries, especially in the West, there are regulations that for you to release your baked product in the market, the acrylamide level should be up to this level. And now to help processors have an easy time in their baked product, because this acrylamide comes with the golden brown color. And everyone, for consumers, when you are, as food scientists, as we are developing food for consumers, first of all, they perceive by seeing. They get attracted first before they know, by the way, what is inside, the nutritional content. And because they want the color still to remain, they had to develop a wheat variety with, when baked, the acrylamide level decreases.
All right. So we can be sure so far that GM foods do not cause cancer. So far? So far,
there are no reports that has shown that GM, and it is a technology that has been there for years. So if it used, it could have caused cancer, then a lot of publications could have done, especially from public health. Yeah.
All right. We are relying on you guys on that specialty to keep us updated and monitor. Now, the last one we will want to mention, does GM foods destroy the environment? You mentioned about off camera about like now in the testing phase, wanting like where this, let's say when BT maize is officially released, that you want to grow them in a secluded farm where they don't interact with cross-pollination to the next maize plantation.
That one is not, it is not a matter of destroying the environment, but protecting the native seeds, because we still need the population. There is a population who still want to remain organic. And now, it's not that it will make these genes, so you'll have an improved variety that was not, hasn't undergone breeding or genetical modification, but because of this gene transfers through pollination. And this happens when the crops of the same species are maybe grown next to each other. There is a tendency that during pollination, genes will be transferred. That is the biggest concern which has happened. There is a country where they realize some of their flax seeds, which were not genetically modified, just because they were growing next to genetically modified. Now they developed the traits, which to them it was the positive trait because they were resistant to pests and diseases. But you know, it is not something out of concert. Maybe the farmer didn't want it. So with regulations, that is why when they are being rolled out to the farmers, there must be regulation to be followed. They are not just being given to farmers, go and grow them. There must be regulation, there must be permits that I'm going to grow genetically modified foods. So my neighbor should not come complaining that I didn't want this variety, but you can see this is the variety that I have. So there are guidelines that has to be followed when you're cultivating. Another issue is development of stubborn weeds. And it has been raised the environmental concern that we might get an ecosystem that wasn't there. And then something else, now we have different strains that have been developed.
The weeds.
Yeah, the weeds and any other plants that are of the same species with the fruits that we are growing. But so far, the regulations are there. I don't think it is a concern, because that was the concern even with our country, that we don't want extinction of our natural ecosystem. Yeah, but what I can say is that this genetically modified food, because there is a possibility of gene transfer. Naturally, definitely cross-pollination will happen.
Yeah.
So when you're cultivating that, there must follow instruction that you shall cultivate it in a place there where we enable the environment that is surrounding your farm that will not be affected. And now that is the case of the government now to identify which areas should be cultivated by these new improved seeds.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think for the meat we can pause there. And have you yourself ever eaten food that you know clearly is a GM food?
If I get, I won't mind.
But you haven't so far?
So far, I don't think I've gotten one.
All right.
Yeah. Even if I've eaten, I didn't know that I'm eating genetically modified, because our neighbors here are cultivating corn, South Africa. And sometimes we import maize from there. And we know 90% of corn cultivated in South Africa is genetically modified. So 90%. Maybe in one way or another we have consumed. Yes.
90%?
Yes.
For human consumption?
For human consumption, yeah.
All right. I see. All right, as we come to the close, you're a food scientist, and you mentioned that you've just formed an association recently. It's called the Association of Kenyan Scientists. Yeah. Just talk to us briefly, like, why did you guys decide to come up with this association? What are you looking forward to achieving?
Okay, this association called the Scientists of Kenya Association, it was born on a way that, like now, if we were there, we could be creating awareness. People should understand what is happening in science, in the field of science. And now this association has brought together scientists, that all scientists that are in Kenya, be it you are a biotechnologist, be it you are a microbiologist, you are a chemist, you are physics, you are food scientist, which in some cases they are scientists who don't even buy the idea of genetically modified. But we are here to form a coalition that we can be able now to bridge the gap. You know, in Kenya we have very many scientists, but sometimes we are feeling a lot because we are not bringing these innovations to work. If the government can embrace such associations and now allow them to showcase the innovations that we can bring change to our nation, be it not only in food security, but even in other areas that in the other area of the science field. Now, these are our objective as an association, and still to link between the laymen who don't understand and science, not to be the link in between. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best in your association. May you grow, may you find more members, and
we are calling upon partners, with the government, the parastatal, the private partnership, who are working in the field of sciences, that they can partner with us. They can give us, some young scientists, they can be given areas where they can show their expertise, they can help in boosting the science and innovation in the country.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Martha, for your time, and also for sharing your knowledge and your experience. We don't take it for granted. We have come to the close of our show, and I trust that you've learned several things about the genetically modified foods, and the summary will be, so far it is shown that genetically modified foods are safe for human consumption from the scientists themselves. And we can discuss about this, we can talk about this, but that is from the scientists themselves. I've been your host, Dr. Chepsi. We appreciate your support in this show, and we really, really appreciate that. So we are going to see you next Thursday. This has been Body Garage, the art of well-being. Cheers.